good day to everyone joining us online today. My name is George Kidoni, and I'm the editor of the Canadian Packaging magazine, published by Annex Business Media in Toronto. On behalf of the magazine and Annex Business Media, it is my pleasure to welcome all of you to our Executive Roundtable webinar titled Where Automation and Sustainability Intersect, during which we will explore the relationship between modern industrial automation technology, primarily packaging automation technology, and the imperatives for CPG manufacturers and their value chain partners to improve the sustainability and circularity of both consumer and industrial packaging as part of the broad global movement to address the looming threat of global warming and climate change. I would like to thank our webinar sponsors who have made this event possible. So a big thank you to all these companies for supporting us in our quest to explore how today's automation technologies can enable CPG companies to accelerate their progress in minimizing their packaging and manufacturing footprint, while also expanding their capabilities to produce new generation sustainable packaging solutions that fit into the vaunted circular economy model, guided by the overall goal of zero waste packaging. So just before I hand over the mic to PMI's Tom Egan, I would like to compliment and to congratulate PMI for all the hard work the association has done and putting together a very insightful business intelligence report titled Sustainability and Technology, the Future of Packaging and Processing. Released by PMI last year, this landmark study has in fact been one of the key inspirations behind the idea of organizing this virtual executive roundtable discussion, which is officially kicking off right now with some introductory commentary and observations from that report as brought to you by our dear friend, Tom Egan. Take it away, Tom.
George, thank you very much for the introduction, and hello to everyone joining us. I think we have a great group today of both consumer packaged goods executives and technology providers to discuss the intersection of these two areas of sustainability and technology. As George mentioned, PMMI's business intelligence team released this study in 2023, and there are some pieces of information here that I think will be very valuable to begin the discussion. So let's talk just briefly and what I will touch on in the opening comments, and then we'll dig deeper as we get involved with our discussion. This was a group of both CPGs, consumer packaged goods firms, and co-packers, representing about 70% of the audience, plus input from 30% OEMs. They discussed a number of topics, the first one of which is EPR, or extended producer responsibility, and we'll have a slide on that in just a minute. We're going to also look at one other PMMI study from late 2022, still very relevant, and it has some information on the EPR and on a sustainability initiatives by companies. The interesting thing you'll see is that while it came out at the very end of 2022, the data that it represents is very relevant to what we're doing today. Our next discussion will be about some automation initiatives that the group from the May 2023 report discussed, and thoughts on that. A very important next step is to talk about the workforce implications. And it's not that the panel will talk all sequentially about these. We'll have a great opportunity to move back and forth among these different discussions during the panel discussion. It's more important to recognize that both as the sustainability initiatives take force, the need for technology and therefore the implications to the workforce have a dramatic effect. and then some of the technologies. And this will be a great source of discussion for the panelists. We have predictive maintenance, big data, cobots, and going on into augmented reality. So we'll jump into those. So I mentioned the first comment is about the extended producer responsibility. This is a legislation that is taking place at all of the provinces in Canada and the states, and in the US, the individual state governments. The legislation is generated by each one of them, and extended producer responsibility is focusing on the post consumer handling of the packaging waste or the packaging remains that were used in order to safely deliver the product to the point of use by the consumer. One of the elements here, this map that you see, is from another trade association called Ameripan. It's as of February of 2024. You see in the US that there are some laws that have already been enacted by states, and then the light blue is where some legislation has been introduced. The important part here is that this extended producer responsibility legislation is a province and state generated legislation, meaning it is not uniform. As a result of that, the consumer packaged goods companies will need to take a look and determine the approach that they'll be using to meet the EPR legislation. And in likewise, all of the technology providers supporting their consumer packaged goods clients will need to be able to provide a solution set or support the solution set that the CPGs decide to implement. I mentioned about another report that the PMMI Business Intelligence team released, and this is a chart. Now, it can be an eye chart. It's less to pay attention to each individual data point. It's more important to recognize that this information represents sustainability investments by industry. And as you see across the top axis, represents all of the major market segments where packaging and processing is an integral part. And then what you see on the vertical column are the initiatives that the companies indicated that they were pursuing. The darker the green, the more information and feedback was received that this is an approach that companies are pursuing. So you see the number one across the board for each of the market segments is sustainable products. And this is a recognition that as we drive forward in bringing the packaging associated with the products to the marketplace, each of the consumer packaged goods firms are driving and looking at what they need to do. And then as a result, the implications or the needs that they will have and the supplier community will be able to provide a solution set for. So, for example, it could be moving from multi-layer to mono-layer material. Well, that may require a change to the setup of a machine. It may require different tooling on the machine. It may require a new set of software controls. Each of these will need to be implemented on new equipment. That is pretty, I'll say straightforward. It's not, but it is on new equipment. And so the OEM, supplier, and technology community will be able to look at it before they ship it. But how about for existing equipment that's already in production operations? That may need some retrofit. And there is where the technology that we'll be talking about and then the workforce implications that I mentioned come into play. Second element had to do then with some automation initiatives. And this is from the study that we spoke about from the early in 2023. We ask about what is one thing your company can do to be prepared. And you see the early collaboration. And this element of collaboration will come up again and again in our discussion. I anticipate it will, because it's the collaboration of the whole of the production team, the corporate group, and then the supplier community. We have to understand the laws and the impacts of non-compliance, the technology and material assessments, and then the information that you have to report. We have an increased awareness, and I think this one has taken hold very strongly. All of the supply chain elements are focused on what they're doing, not only to deliver a safe and effective product to the consumer, but to look at the sustainability elements. And then you see the all of the different initiatives going down. One other area for automation initiatives that I would recommend is that PMMI a number of years ago started a group called the OpEx Leadership Network. And this is a group that provides work products, provides the best practices on a by industry for industry basis. That is, we get together a group of consumer packaged goods and some OEMs in order to take a look at what can be the best practices to implement to improve your production operations. And as you see on the bottom point here on the slide, it includes a whole range of solution sets: request for proposal, RFP, total cost of ownership, TCO, factory acceptance test, and site acceptance test. Interestingly, we put together both the factory acceptance test and site acceptance test as a request from the CPG community, because once you go from the successful FAT and you move into the site acceptance test, there is that important element to bring along the whole of the production team and the production workforce. There are other ones too, including asset utilization. You can check them out at the opexleadershipnetwork.org or through the pmmi.org website. Check those out, utilize them. They are not prescriptive. They provide a wealth of information, and they do help both the CPG and the OEM address these different elements. I mentioned about workforce initiatives now, and not a surprise to all of us in the area, but and proven by all sorts of independent data points, the workforce shortage that we are experiencing now and have been since the pandemic will continue for a number of years. There are many, many more, there are millions more manufacturing jobs available than there are individuals to come into the workforce right now to fill them. We need operators with new skills and collaboration. Here's the collaboration element again. It's collaboration up and down the line as the automation continues to move into various parts of the production line and even to a fully automatic production line. The operators need some new skills to understand what's happening on the line and to quickly report up and probably most likely collaborate not only with others in their team, but possibly also the plant leadership, the operations leadership, and possibly the engineering teams that are involved. Training is changing, and I'm pretty sure the panel will have some really good insights on this. The idea that the standard training of let's go in, sit in a classroom, and go with a 3-day training program is not something that's working now. The time is not always available, and more importantly, we as individuals learn differently. And so training for the production team is definitely changing. Production ops, one quick example, you see much more information moving to a tablet approach rather than a fixed control station. The fixed control stations exist. The information that's coming across in the production operations is often moving to tablets because as we continue to have the workforce change and bring in younger and younger individuals, then we have the expectation and the comfort level with having information in your hand. And then the opportunity to use augmented reality, remote access, and other elements in order to support what the production team is doing. The last chart that you see there at the bottom was a study and the response that we received during the preparation of the report. We asked, on terms of all the different automation that you might look at as as the automation takes over manual tasks, did you find it overall successful, not successful, very successful? And look at those numbers. 88% said successful, 96% said successful or very successful. Only 4% reported that the automation initiatives that they attempted were not successful. So the implication here is that automation will continue to move into every element of the production operation. And for the most part, for the vast majority of the items, they are very successful. Now, this is a busy slide, less important that we concentrate on each of them and more to look at the charts overall. In the center is which of the following digitization initiatives is your company using? Pretty strong, not just strong, overwhelmingly strong. 71% said they are working in predictive maintenance. And then it drops off a little bit from there. Cobots, big data on premise and cloud based. What I did to surround that, and what we'll talk about then with the panel, is the individual responses that we received. As you can look on the circles that surround the main chart, what we see there is the more green, the more initiative, the more companies are using that initiative. So we said 71% on predictive maintenance. You notice that the last slide, or excuse me, the last circle represents digital twins. And this has the lowest take up of any of the initiatives in consumer packaged goods. Doesn't mean it won't be coming. Probably means that it's taking a little bit more to get it underway. There needs to be perhaps a little more understanding of what companies can do with the digital twin data, and in fact, even perhaps how to establish and set up the digital twin for a given operation in their own business. So a busy slide, but really it goes together. The circles feed the information that's on the main chart in the middle with the blue bars. And George, that concludes some brief elements. There's more information in the report. I think now it's important to get with our panelists to continue this discussion.
Well, thank you very much, Tom, for providing this very informative context to our forthcoming discussion. And I guess the best place to start would be to ask our panelists to share their company's experience so far in leveraging robotics and other existing automation technologies to achieve better packaging sustainability performance for your company and for your customers. For automation suppliers out there, perhaps you could share some experience you had with your customers in helping them achieve their sustainability goals. And of course, for CPGs, what have you done to minimize your footprint by using automation technologies? Who would like to start on that?
George, I'm happy to embrace that question if you'd like. So from ProPak's perspective, several years ago, 3 years ago, we were introduced to a new sector of using robotics to assemble food products. The environment was 5 degrees. It was very challenging. To be honest, with COVID, you couldn't have people side by side doing tasks just because they were in too close proximity to the people around them. So we developed systems that would assemble sandwiches. So we would take a croissant or an English muffin, we would cut it in half. We would assemble the protein, sausage, egg. They'd put the cheese on, and we put the tops back on at a speed of about 185 a minute. We could have gone faster, but what was downstream didn't lend itself to us going any faster. But that was a really good opportunity for us to jump into a new sector. We learned what IP69K standards were, which means that you can basically take a full foaming and wash down for 3 or 4 hours, including the HMIs. So it was it was an area that is now a growing part of our business. At one time we didn't address, but again, utilizing robotics for that type of a task ended up being very successful for the end user as well as the technology provider.
Sustainability, is certainly around reduction of waste. And I think the one thing that aligns well between precision manufacturing automation and waste reduction is human error. The one thing that always stands out to me, and we have a number of facilities across North America, some assemble meals and sandwiches, and we should talk, Chris. And at some point during setup, there's an excessive amount of waste. Once you get to that point, how do you deal with that? The better we collaborate between automation, machine integration, and machine learning, the less waste there is. And if you've watched any packaging machine set up, the amount of packaging waste that's created at startup is a golden opportunity for a sustainability initiative. And with INC4 in Ottawa this week, there's a lot of discussion around reduction of plastics in landfill. And anything that you can do in precision manufacturing to reduce the amount is a good first step. And I think automation aligns really well with reduction of waste.
Yeah, I can kind of add to that, George, and Doug, you're absolutely right. From Harpak Aluminum's side, being an automation and packaging OEM, that we specialize on full line solutions, right? Automated and packaging. So it's a big responsibility on our end where our customer says, okay, here you're receiving the product. Here's the packaging machine it needs to go into. Here's the rate. Here's the space. Here's where I want the pallet to be all completed and stretch wrapped and ready to go into the warehouse. And it's a big responsibility for us to make that line, minimize the waste, minimize the changeover time, minimize the footprint, minimize the defects, but maximize the flexibility. So make sure that line can run multiple SKUs, can do everything within a certain footprint that works with the process flow and safety for the plant and the plant personnel, but also make it as flexible as possible to be able to do multiple things and do it very efficiently. And so it's a big responsibility for us to kind of take on a task like that. But also, once that equipment is set and running, it's also very important to give the customer the tools to keep it efficient, like onboard OEE calculations, doing proper FMEAs, failure modes and effects analysis during like the engineering and before the FAT, to make sure if something does go wrong, how do you minimize that downtime and minimize the defects? And then, of course, with remote maintenance and, of course, the training after the fact, making sure that the operators are properly trained. I think someone I heard before say, a happy operator means, a happy, successful packaging and automated line. So, so it's a big responsibility for us to make it as flexible and as efficient as possible, but also give the customers the tools to keep it that way through training and remote maintenance, things like that.
I agree with John and Doug, on the waste, flexibility of the equipment for us. With our customer, the Cobalt Palletizer has been, a way of better use the resources, which is important in your journey of sustainability. And not only that, is that by better using resources, you also offer a great environment to work. You eliminate some repetitive tasks, empower your employees also to use innovative technologies. And so it really better align with sustainability in that sense.
Sorry, I can't stop talking. Anyway, you guys inspired me. With vision systems that are integrated into robotics, there's a golden opportunity to address not only EPR, Tom, which is an excellent point, extended producer responsibility, but also this week, our Minister of the Environment talked about plastics producers' ownership for the life cycle of plastics. And I think being able to embed some sort of traceability into the packaging or understand the mass balance between what is actually produced and what hits the recycle facilities is really important for us to understand. And there's a golden opportunity within automation, rather than tracking things with the amount of cumbersome labor-intensive processes that would be in place, to apply automation to life cycle tracking and EPR. And I think there's a good chance that vision systems used within robotics and packaging systems to better provide precision packaging, but also to provide traceability on plastics materials. Filters and systems can be integrated to understand the types of plastics, where they're going, how much is being produced. I think there's a great opportunity to understand better where the plastics are going. They're certainly not being recycled. The recycle rate in our municipal landfill in Canada is 9%. So 9% of what we send to the recycle facilities is all that's being recycled. The balance is filling up the landfill.
Yeah, so we've at our facility, we've invested heavily in the last few years, especially into automation. I mean, it's we've saw this, coming with the lack of people that there was going to be in Canada. Well, it's everywhere, I guess. But it really has helped us in obviously waste reduction. I mean, you take 12-hour shifts at our facility, we're around 24/7. So, take a 12-hour shift, people get tired, likely so, standing all day, you're not as good as sorting or packaging, you let more waste go by. With machines, they don't get tired. The accuracy's there from 1 minute clear through 24 hours later doesn't change. So I think to be successful in reducing your waste within your facility, automation is going to be key now, key moving forward. There's going to be there's not going to be a stop to the shortage of the amount of people. So we're going to continue to keep investing into as much automation as possible. We were in the midst of actually looking at big data, I guess, where we would have live from the start of production clear through to monitor waste live, and it would record feedback, so we could monitor wherever from my iPhone or from a desktop, and have screens throughout the facility, so everybody would see the actual waste. It'd be pounds per hour, or it'd be bags, or whatever the number is. But then it'd be tangible numbers that they could see, where they would see the dollar value that's associated with. So they would see, okay, well, we're covered bridge ships, we're running at, $853 an hour in waste. And so that's something they could tangibly see and understand and look to help improve on and be more sustainable for, the company and the environment. We haven't got there yet, but that's on our radar, and that's going to be our initiative in the coming year.
Ryan, you're hitting an element that actually Doug had a great comment on a similar thing during the presentation with Canadian Packaging last year. He had mentioned that one of the suppliers had said they were able to provide some information on the use of a particular utility. And Doug said, that's great. He said, I can see it. And just as you indicated, Ryan, it's the number of bags in a given line or over a given time. He said what Doug said, and what has struck me, even now I'm remembering a year later, was turn that into a data point that can really drive it home for our team. So what you just said, we just turn it around and we say, that's $800 an hour. The waste that you're doing right now is $800 an hour on this product off of this line. That certainly changes the whole idea of going, we've lost 287 bags or 3,600 bags. We've lost $853 of saleable product. And that is a really good point. It brings in, we're still collecting the big data, but we're now translating that information into something that everybody on the production team can understand.
I have two words, blockchain and Nate, because he's chomping at the bit to talk about Red Zone.
Yeah, for sure. So we, what Ryan just mentioned is essentially where we found a really good niche in the industry, where, we have all these automation solutions that companies have been looking to implement over the last, a handful of years. And everyone wants to have that data, but by the time you pull a report at the end of the shift or the end of the week or the month, oftentimes it's great to have that data, but it's too late to do anything with that information. So our solution sits alongside those automation solutions, we can pull data in, but the idea is that it's all real time, it's all visible. So we have the mobile devices right next to each line. We have big screen TVs, and just like Ryan mentioned, we actually do have the ability to put in the dollar impact per hour. And so a lot of those tasks that create a lot of the waste, so whether it's changeovers or startups, every minute that goes by that we are continuing to produce that waste, we have it in front of the whole team so that they can see the impact that they have on the results. So it ultimately leads to a better engaged workforce, but also more productivity and better quality product out the door.
Yeah, well, that's yeah. I know I'm very familiar with your company too. We did have a representative at one point a few years ago, but we weren't quite ready at that point. But actually, it's going to be a little easier for us now. We were going to take our existing line and start to convert to get that data, but since we had the fire 8 weeks ago, now we'll be building from scratch. So it's going to be a little easier to implement now what we want, or the vision that we'd always had. And the data part is going to be a huge piece of that, as well as the automation through end to end.
Brian, time invested with Red Zone is well spent. We have a number of facilities using Red Zone, and I can visualize the TVs in our offices and in our production facilities tracking exactly as you described. I could just see Nate practically exploding wanting to talk about this.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate that.
Now that we have established that, I wonder if we could look a little closer on some of the automation technologies and processes that offer perhaps the biggest opportunity for packaging sustainability improvements. And I'm thinking of the startup companies or companies who are just getting their feet wet with automation, and like what should they be first and foremost concentrating on. So and what will offer them the best ROI on their journey? Would it be robotics, digitalization, AI, big data, predictive maintenance, digital twins, additive manufacturing, industry 4.0? There's a lot out there, and not everyone is able to address the need for those capabilities all at once. So what would be a good starting point for them in terms of, getting off on the right track towards a sustainable way of doing business through packaging and product sustainability?
I'll jump in there for a minute, George. Thanks. From somebody, I'm sure there's other guys, started from scratch. We just finished 15 and a half years in production, and we started with, basically nothing and built the building. What I will say, because you talk about startups, startups can mean a lot of different things. That could mean, there's a lot of, money behind it, but it could be, somebody that's hustling and starting from nothing and working along themselves. I'm going to take it from an angle of, they're starting with a limited budget. And what I would say is you don't want to buy all the shiny new equipment at first, but you want to keep in mind to be able to add those pieces at the right time as you're building it out. And then you want to take and look for, when you set it up to be as streamlined as possible, you can do a lot of automation just through, sensors and PLC work and programming that doesn't cost you a lot of money. And then the second part would be to start to pick at your low-lying fruits. So look at what's the biggest thing that cost you the most money. For us, in our first big piece of automation, it was grading of the product. So, if you take 4 shifts and you've got 5 people grading, well, it wasn't long for me to just figure out that, okay, well, the automated sorting machine is the quickest low-lying fruit, and you remove these wages and you do the math, and your ROI is this many years. And so you do it that way. You just pick along at each item until you work to get automated fully in the end.
Yeah, we have customers ask us all the time, or maybe someone like Ryan will be like, come on in, spend a couple hours in the plant, walk the plant, and give us an idea of where we should start, right? Because we don't know automation very well, or we don't have a lot of experience with it, or don't have a ton of engineering resources or robotics experts in-house. So where should we start? And usually what I look for is, of course, the manual process, number one. Where do you have the most labor resources kind of doing real menial tasks where those people aren't probably very happy in their job, probably aren't going to last very long. I know turnover is a ridiculous number these days where our customers can train people on a Monday, 11 people on a Monday, and they'll have 3 or 4 people left by lunch on Thursday because the jobs are very difficult. So we try to go and look for those real menial tasks that have a lot of labor resources attached to them, and then see, what we can do in that space. I think, and I'm sure Nicholas can speak to this too, but collaborative robots are blowing up. They're huge because they're they're a simpler, more cost-effective way to eliminate those menial tasks within the plant. I'll have customers come in and just say, walk around and show me where you can put a cobot, right? Because even one labor resource for something that's very hard to staff is worth it for them to eliminate that job for a person and have that person do something else within the plant so they can cultivate that employee and have them and retain them longer. So yeah, those are things I look for: high risk safety issues, people palletizing, lifting 50-pound boxes over their head all day. That's definitely, and palletizing is another kind of low hanging fruit of automation, probably the simplest piece of it. And then stuff where a cobot can be put into place, very simple programming, very flexible, modular, can do all different types of tasks with some simple programming.
What I could add to what John mentioned is that definitely, as George, you said, customers are looking for a fast ROI. What we observed is also among the different options throughout the production line, towards the end of the line, there's generally a lower risk as you don't disrupt your old production line. So this is a fast way to also have immediate results. We have seen, for example, cobot using palletizer, our customers having a return on investment of about a year. And that is also going along with what Tom said on labor shortage. As we know, these tasks are sometimes tough to fulfill as you go down the production line. There's less value also at this point that you're adding to your product. And so definitely the cobot technologies have been very powerful for such footprint in the sustainability for the companies and the small companies you mentioned, George.
I think one of the biggest challenges around ROI on automation is scale. So smaller companies have a disadvantage on the return on investment. Some of the things like turnover, it's hard to apply a cost to that, training, waste isn't often enough added in. Those are all real elements that can help improve the ROI, and maybe the equipment manufacturers working closer with the prospective small business to understand the real costs that they're experiencing in the operating landscape we have right now. But in addition, how do we find scale? How do we utilize automation to build scale into smaller operations where it's still a little bit challenging? So how do you bring that collaborative robotics, flexible manufacturing, and maybe reduce setup time to utilize the same equipment for multiple different products? That's a great way to solve some of the problems John was talking about related to labor turnover and help us with our ROI.
At the end of the day, scale is the holy grail of real measure, real leap in sustainability performance. And you can look no farther than Coca-Cola recently reporting that now all their PET bottles are either renewable or recyclable or falling into those all those the green categories that they've been promising for years and have finally realized. And I think they're one of the first to do it precisely because of the scale that they have. But not everyone, of course, has the budgets and the deep pockets and technological resources of Coca-Cola. So how could we kind of use their example of what they've been able to achieve with renewability and recycling it and PCR content and so on.
I could comment on that quick, George. The things we've seen in the industry is we work with a lot of small to mid-sized food and beverage and CPG companies, and I think it is the hardest thing for a lot of them, just from conversations, is to take the first step towards this journey of automation, and it can feel a little bit scary if it's a bigger number and the ROI is a little bit harder to calculate. But the way we start out is we need to give them at least a starting point, and we could do that pretty quickly with some simple sensors. Obviously, that gives you a very crude, basic view of your performance. But if you're able to track, for something like a bagger, how many bags you've cycled through and then how many cases you actually produced, you're at least starting on that journey of how much waste you created, and we're showing to you that in real time. But the cool thing for us is over the last few years, we've seen people as they've done those initiatives, just to install a few simple sensors, they start to become more efficient, they improve their margins. All of a sudden that leads to getting more business. And then you're able to go then look at more sophisticated automated solutions that you can then implement and then continue this kind of snowball effect and continue to go down this journey with automation and sustainability. So I think the biggest thing is looking at what initial steps you can take to get started, and then see what makes the most sense for your business beyond that.
And also for the small guys, I think just to circle back to the emergence of collaborative robots, as a packaging industry observer more than insider, I've been really impressed over the last decade or so by this breathtaking emergence and rapid growth, just breathtaking growth in collaborative robots. And I'd like to ask your expert opinions on how you see further embrace of cobots on the assembly lines, their impact in achieving the company's sustainable packaging goals, while also creating sustainable jobs that people want as a result of improved engagement, enthusiasm, workplace safety, ergonomics, and all those other things we talked about that cobots are very well positioned to provide, not only for existing large companies in certain areas of the packaging line process, but for the startups with limited budgets.
Before we had our fire, we've been looking at robotic palletization for about 2 years now. And we were narrowing down through exactly what we wanted. And in our new build, we will definitely have it. It's one of those repetitive tasks that, if you have to put a box that's, 8 feet tall on a pallet, even though it's not heavy, that repetitive task is very daunting on somebody's back, their shoulders, when they're doing that, 12 hours a day. So it's going to be a must in our new facility. But what I'll say is, when we started, that was definitely not in the cards. What was envisioned at being there. So I would say for smaller, whether it's startup companies or ones that are looking to scale, if we're able to look at some automation pieces that were kind of more budgetary, maybe they're not as fast, but they're more budgetary, that you can, it could be used in a multifaceted, same kind of category, but in different types of segments, I guess. So that way it's a lower cost that somebody can look at and say, okay, well, look, I can reduce 3 people, and that's with maintenance and repairs and interest on my money, that's a 7-year payback. Well, that's something they could take to a lender and put, 1 robot in to do, 2 different products, for example. But, if we only build things that are to massive scale, then it makes it a little tougher for, entry companies or smaller companies trying to scale up.
Just adding on to what Ryan was saying, square footage is really important. I think I talked about this last year as well. And the nice thing about cobots is you can work closely with them as people. It's not like the old palletizers with this giant case, and you needed a 30 by 30 square foot area to keep all the people away from the machines. I think maybe Chris can talk more about integrating people and square footage with smaller collaborative systems.
The reality is that from our exposure to that sector of the market, that's not an area that we're strong in. We are seeing it being utilized for palletizing. I've looked at cobots for different applications that seem to be speed limited. If I'm trying to pick and place something at 100 a minute, there's not a cobot, because you have to have a safe zone around that unit in order for it to be safe. But for palletizing, I think it's spectacular. And then I just want to move a little bit to the question where you ask questions about AI, and maybe Nate can jump in. But from a machine manufacturer's perspective, I'm seeing AI coming into the marketplace where the companies like a Rockwell that's providing the hardware for the electronics are using AI and providing the manufacturers 70% of the programming already complete. So we see that driving down the cost of equipment, and the fact that you're getting you're already starting with 70% complete, and then you're only personalizing the 30% that's left. And I mean, if you look at AI, we've had it for many years in a smaller scale. For example, if a wrapper is running and it's continuing having to correct in one direction, it will apply that technology and reestablish what the length of the product is. But moving forward, I see AI as taking raw information and applying changes to the line in real time. Nate, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure, Chris. I can definitely chime in. We are definitely leveraging AI in our product and the way that we see our customers using the solution. I think our focus is a little more geared towards some of the challenges we talked about earlier, where the workforce has shifted. It's a younger generation. There's a lot of turnover, so we don't always have a workforce that has been there for years and years with a lot of tribal knowledge. And so a lot of what we've built into it is to be flexible and adapt to that sort of environment. And so we leverage AI for things like Google Translate and live translation. We have factories that have 30 different languages on the shop floor, and to create something like a startup guide or a changeover guide in a video format, where in order to do this efficiently and get the machine up and running and not have that waste and scrap, to record 30 different videos for that group of people would be incredibly time consuming. But the way it works in our solution, you can record the video once, and then the user has their profile and they can control their preferred language. And so ultimately they can digest that. They're better at their job. They're more engaged, and really that leads to improved retention, less turnover, because they feel like they have the tools they need to be successful. And the other big way we use it is we can actually look at trends of past problems, past things. Like, if I was working on an issue with maybe a machine was jamming in the same fashion every single time. Well, when the operator says, "Yep, we're down again. We've been down for 20 minutes for this same machine jam." As we create that library of standard work with video work instructions and other things, when they select that problem, we can automatically push to them and say, "Hey, somebody else has had this same problem as you before. Would you like to look at some work instructions or some video content to say how you can fix that problem?" So they can get that information, rather than, if you've ever looked on YouTube for anything, how long does it take to find a relevant video that matters to you? So instead of them going to look for that content, we can actually curate it to them and say, "Hey, this is the problem that has happened before. Why don't you watch this video? I think it'll help your situation." So definitely trying to leverage AI in ways that help that frontline worker do their job better every day.
It's really interesting to hear kind of how everyone is using AI in a different way. That's really interesting, Nate. Yeah, we started the AI, the Industry 4.0 kind of pathway about 6 years ago. We partnered with Rockwell and a company called PTC out of Boston. We actually announced it at the 2018 PAC Expo in Chicago, and so we're kind of almost 6 years into the the Industry 4.0 pathway, but how we're kind of focusing is really on preventative maintenance, digital twins, and remote maintenance. What Nate kind of gave me the idea is like, we know that all these operators are kind of retiring here in the next 5 or 10 years. We're losing a lot of product knowledge, a lot of maintenance knowledge. And a lot of those people aren't kind of coming, the younger generation isn't exactly gravitating towards those type of jobs. But I think if we can integrate AI into some of these aspects of manufacturing, you might be able to open the pathway for a younger generation to be more involved. Because this stuff is really interesting. Being able to work on a digital twin in one room while the machine's running in the other room, and training on how to change a tool out, or how to power down the machine, or how to do some type of a jam clearance without having to actually shut down the machine, and doing it all in another room with a 3D vision it's right in front of you. It's really interesting. So I think it's another thing that could open up the opportunity for a younger generation to be more involved, because we are losing a lot of product and manufacturing knowledge. A lot is retiring over the next 5 or 10 years.
Anything that can get young people excited about the manufacturing industry is all right in my books. We all agree on that.
Yeah, we also have to remember too, like, we're not just attracting talent within, Canada, I guess. I mean, I'm sure others do it as well, but we try to bring and retain people from other countries. I mean, we started down that road maybe 10 years ago, but it's always seemed to hit a blockade. And then about 4 years ago, we just decided to roll the dice, and we built, a large housing complex because housing is impossible to find. That's another big issue, is for people to move to Canada that want to come here and work at their permanent residency and have lots of capability, lots of knowledge, very good at different jobs, whether that's in maintenance or it's in robotics or anything. But it's the housing is very difficult. So we decided to build our own housing, and we brought people in from different countries for different jobs. And that's something you're going to have to continue to do, just because we don't have enough people to do all the jobs required in Canada right now.
Yeah, and there's an opportunity to offer to these workers technologies that is a pleasure to work with, very easy to use. So along with what we mentioned on AI, I think it's important also to have intuitive programming, machine learning. This is very important. So without necessarily being into deep AI, there's an opportunity for manufacturers to have fewer components in their equipment, and also something we have a chance to experience, for example, with cobots, is there's a way to offer advanced optimized programming that is fully integrated in the system, and you would achieve better results at a lower speed than you would expect. Meaning that if you program it your own way, you may have multiple points. For example, programming the robot, you will have to run at a higher speed. But if you do it with a full integrated system by the manufacturer, you would end up with lower speed. You would save on energy, of course, of the equipment. So that's also very important as far as manufacturing, not only AI, but also all the optimization and automation, George. And in the end, it's offering something very nice to work for workers wherever they are from. We have seen this a lot on shop floors, people really enjoying these technologies.
I think Chris raised a very interesting point around speed. And in our industry, it's a lot of small units moving very quickly into packages. Consumer packaged goods quite often are like that. I believe automation really evolved in the automotive sector, where it's slow cycles, large components, and cycle rates can be slower, and space is a lot larger. I think we could maybe learn something from these collaborative robots that are going to be our masters one day, that to learn how to collaborate, to work together, to understand how to take existing processes that are high speed, small unit, and find ways to build automation systems that are collaborative, but that can better adapt to the way that we operate our businesses. And I'm not saying that there's a bad thing, but we keep going back to case packing where, 50 units in a case and one cycle of a case palletizer works great. What about loading those little boards of bacon into the vacuum packaging on the thermoforming machine? How do we keep up with 60 cycles a minute, 1 per second, a very floppy substance into a very precision package? But we have to maintain that line speed. How do we better collaborate? And perhaps that's an opportunity where we could be more like the collaborative cobots and work together better to find solutions that work at our speed, but still adopt the large scale automation philosophies that are well built into automation.
What we're seeing is that there's Delta style robots will accomplish the speed rate that you're looking for, Doug. That a Delta style robot, they came out about 20 years ago. There's multiple manufacturers now that produce them, and they have some that will work in a washdown environment that will be able to, understanding it's not just a flimsy piece of bacon. It's a sanitary environment that needs full cleaning. And there is equipment that will accomplish that. I really don't see that being addressed by anything other than a robot that is produced for that particular application, right? But you are using a Delta style robot. The only thing you're customizing is the tooling. So that type of application can be addressed in today's technology.
Yeah, more often than not, Chris, you're right. Our customers want to go faster, not slower, right?
Yeah.
Everybody, volume is a huge driver of automation, and those, right, the high speed deltas, the pick and place systems. We're quoting thousands of products a minute on some of these systems, loading thermoformers or loading flow wrappers, and those aren't going away. That is the best technology for that, and you're right. But the key is, how do you minimize the amount of robots you need to do that 1,000 a minute? And then, right, how many gripper changes do you need? Because you're right, that should be the only thing you need to change out, would be like the gripper or the tool of the machine. And to Doug's point, the collaboration, our most successful projects are where the collaboration is the highest with the end user. It's just bar none. Because we don't know what we don't know, right? The end user knows their product the best. They know their plant, they know their team the best. When there's a more like we'll say eye to eye level of OEM and end user and a collaboration for the successful project is where we found the most success. So I think it's just critical to have a successful for a project that has multiple pieces of automation and the synchronization of all different types of technologies. To really have the end user be open enough to tell us their pain points and where they, where the best opportunity is. And so collaboration is just huge.
So, John, it's a point that PMMI is beginning to look at also with the idea that this whole approach on the collaboration, sometimes the transition from a successful project that's implemented between the corporate engineering group and the OEM gets into the plant, and there is a change now. The lead, if you will, is no longer corporate engineering, but it's the plant team, it's the production team. And now that idea of getting closer collaboration between the OEM supplier and the production team becomes more paramount. You need that element of the people that are working with it every day. And even toward Doug's point of the philosophy, it's less about maybe the specific solution set and more about the philosophy that I want the throughput. So while the system can operate at 287 per minute, and that's what we purchased, and it did show that it's capable of that, it might be that for a given type of product that you're using for something as changeable as what you have with a fresh meat product, that you say, hey, the actual premium operating speed on this thing is not 287, it's 262, because we get so much more throughput at that 262. But that's a learning piece, right? That's the learning piece between what the production team knows and then what the OEM can learn from the production team who's using this on a regular basis. I think it's a fascinating area. It may be a piece that the teams, toward our collaboration idea, the teams need to look at a little bit more to say, corporate engineering has not been running this on a day-to-day basis now. It's the production team. Let's hear from the production team what they have been seeing. Let's capture from a production team what they think is going to be the best piece. Or, it doesn't seem like much, but this one area here keeps giving us an issue. What can we address with that?
Right. It's such a critical point. This just happened to me a couple of months ago, where we were working with a corporate engineering team for weeks on a project going through URS. And we're like, okay, well, we really need to see, and the corporate engineering team was actually in Europe, and the plant was in here, and it was actually in the US. And we're like, well, we need to go see the plant, talk to the plant level people. And when we got there, they hadn't even seen the URS yet. So these are the people that have to live with the equipment, right? And they're the ones that really have, in the end, are going to be giving a thumbs up, thumbs down to the equipment, because they know if it's going to work or fit there. And they hadn't even seen the URS yet. So there's the collaboration that wasn't maybe internal on the customer's end there, where corporate engineering was driving it, but get the plant people involved earlier, because and we were also quoting a project for 2 different plants. So one plant, as you all know, is completely different than the other plant, even though they might be running the same product. The way that their team is structured, the way their plan is laid out, could be totally different. So even though we're quoting one duplicate system, it's really 2 different projects. So getting the plant level involved earlier would help a lot. Would definitely speed up the process.
And for Doug's approach with multiple plants, I'm guessing that he would like the 2 plants to talk a little bit more, because then plant A says, hey, here's an approach and we prefer this one. And plant B says, we're having great success similar to that, but with this one other element. It's where you get, again, collaboration. Now it's with 2 production teams that are sharing their best ideas and then feeding those back, if you will, to the leadership group and to the corporate engineering team to say, let's find the best approach here to move forward.
Yeah, sharing best practices is more of a culture than a line item. It's really required. Collaboration makes things work better. I think everyone's really amplified that very well.
Which packaging machinery types and categories offer the biggest payback potential and best ROI in terms of automating the company's sustainable strategies and tactics in reducing their environmental footprint?
George, I'm happy to start off. Our primary business in high-speed flow wrapping and secondary packaging, I believe that they're the primary packaging and the secondary packaging. So primary packaging being taking a naked product and wrapping it with a horizontal wrapper. Secondary packaging meaning that you're taking the wrapped product and putting it into a carton, a overwrap, something that would be your point of purchase item. So from our perspective, we try to wrap the product as quickly as possible, because once you have a wrapped product, you can then accumulate it, you can store it, versus a naked product is very challenging in trying to accumulate a naked product. So we try to wrap it as quickly as possible, and then we'll put some accumulation between the primary and secondary packaging, meaning that at all times we keep the wrappers running. And that is key to success in ensuring that your wrappers are always wrapping. They should have an efficiency rate of greater than 99%. So they're continuing to wrap product. As product is then reintroduced into the secondary packaging leg, any product that is accumulated would have a separate leg that would be refeeding product without any operator intervention and bringing product in to your final secondary package. And after that point, it's easy to accumulate product and put it into stages of accumulation, and they don't have any high sanitary areas that you would have to expose it to for cleaning. To give you an example, some of the sanitation for naked product would take 8 hours to sanitize, which would limit you to a 2-shift operation. So sanitation in a naked product is everything. Our complete models have all changed. I mean, we've gotten away from tubular structure to solid steel, making sure that there's no areas where bacteria can grow. So, but I would suggest that the primary and secondary packaging is your most bang for the buck.
And to take this further in terms of sustainability context, how far along are we in having access to new generation machinery that can switch over from traditional packaging materials to so-called or so designated sustainable packaging materials like say monolayer plastics or paper based packaging.
If we talk about paper-based packaging, there are parts of Europe that need the substrate to be 95% one material, and 5% is allowed for adhesives and printing. That is a huge number. And when you're applying paper, just in general, you have to apply a lot more heat. So you have heaters that are through the forming area of the film. So you're preheating the paper. You're then applying heat in your sealing areas. And your forming boxes become very elaborate, as you can imagine trying to take a sheet of paper and turning it into a perfect funnel to allow you to go through, whether it's a horizontal or vertical bagger. It's very challenging. That technology does exist today, and it's limited to about 80 meters a minute of film, just to try to establish where that. So there's not really a huge differential in speed compared to the flexible films, but we see that across the board, people going to paper-based products for primary packaging.
If I can add something, George, to your question, a lot of the materials that have evolved over the decades are related to shelf life, and that's really related to the retailers. A lot of this is driven by our supply chain and maintaining a longer and longer shelf life and better product integrity for the long term. Those are to really offset things that aren't thought of in that process. We've probably got too thick a film now for the types of precision manufacturing that Chris is talking about, that John talked about, Nicholas talked about, and we may have an opportunity to undo some of that overbuild in packaging by just accepting the reality that we don't need to have perhaps multi-layers, and we can move towards monolayer films. Maybe paper can work in the right applications, but we have such an inbred safety factor built in to extend the shelf life because of our supply chain. Large country, few retailers, lot of extension to shelf life is related to the complexity of the plastics, which is why we have such a difficult time having recycled materials. And maybe they're not necessary. Maybe a broader, deeper dialogue around precision manufacturing, reliable packaging, and real shelf life might be more useful than just simply trying to push a simple agenda. I think automation does a better job than what it did 20 years ago, but I don't think packaging has reversed the direction that it's evolved towards.
I don't think I think that that's a good approach. Let's be in the clear proactive piece, Doug. The element of understanding that we need to be able to still provide that product to the safe point of use by the consumer is the driver. Packaging must provide that. It's a central element. And we understand, all of us in the industry understand that. It's the idea now of saying, hey, what other things have changed? Has the supply chain shortened? Have we gotten better at monitoring temperature to make it consistent throughout what we're doing? And then turning around and saying, okay, perhaps the material thickness now can be considered. Perhaps a different format can be considered, still though with the ultimate aim that the packaging for whatever market segment you're looking at, food, beverage, consumer care, personal care products, needs to provide needs to support the product getting to the point of safe use by the consumer.
The advances in different, barrier coating technologies and, or say, nanotechnology, whenever that kicks off on a major scale. I mean, all those things, they're not worthy pursuits in terms of just reducing the sheer mass of waste that ends up in landfill, oceans, and so on.
George, you're also referring to like biodegradable packaging in your comment, I assume as well, correct?
In part, but not not limited to. There are paper-based solution for fresh produces, that can provide decent shelf life by with certain coating barrier technologies and so on. So there's progress in that area all the time. And so how long will it take for automated packaging machinery to get more sophisticated enough to introduce those technologies into inline packaging process?
Yeah, George, I know that last week in a conference with PMMI members, there were two specific examples provided where a supplier is working with a CPG company to change the tooling that is being used for a change in material. In one of them, they were moving from a flexible material to a paper-based material. It was a pretty big change, and the companies were working together in order to be able to use existing equipment. I had mentioned this earlier in the introductory comments that it's one element to say that a new machine, and I'm sure that Chris and John and Nicholas can talk about this. It's one thing to say we're going to work on a new machine and provide it. The existing infrastructure with production operations now is so large that we must also be able to find a solution that works with a retrofit to some part of existing equipment. And that's an element in these two examples that I mentioned, where I thought it was fascinating. The OEM and the consumer packaged goods firm had worked together to say, the CPG said, we are changing this material. What impact will that have on the line? What do we need to do? Because we still need throughput to that. And then toward that element, what are the changes? I thought Chris's example also, not that it was one that I'm referencing from these other two, but just to go to the paper format. Hey, there are some speed ideas that we really must monitor. And then in addition to that, the forming technology that needs to be used to handle from one element from film to go to paper is different. And there's technology involved in doing that. There's capability, there's collaboration involved. And I think it's fascinating that the industry is doing this and coming through with some of these solutions.
But George, I think that Ryan was asking a question on biodegradable films. Did you have something to add there, Ryan?
Yeah, I guess I was just trying to have a second outlook on that is, whether that's switching to a paper base, we're talking about the machinery aspect and making those changes. But, when you talk paper or biodegradable, we're looking at shelf life issues. I mean, we gas flush everything at our place, but, it's still, if you lower that, impermeable membrane thing, you shorter your shelf life, you have more turnover at store for waste, and then also the price of the packaging itself. I mean, with the hyperinflation we've had, I mean, how much more can whether it's my product or another one, how much more can it take? We've already seen sales starting to soften a little bit in some industries just because of price points. Inflation's not quite done yet, I don't think. I think we're still going to see a little more. And so what's that going to look like if, as we start to change out packaging and we add another, 15 cents to a certain item, and then at retail it becomes 25 or 30 cents more. When does that stop? Or that's just something else, you need to think about outside of the machinery aspect and the changeovers.
I'm not advocating it as a silver solution, but governments all over the place are, pushing this agenda of plastic reduction quite dogmatically, and I don't see us really getting away from those pressures. So we have to do something. And I guess the trick is to make sure that whatever that form the substitution takes place, it can be done on a scale that preserves all the virtues that automation offers. The scale, the speed, the productivity, the quality, all those things. So how do we reconcile all that?
Chris, I don't know if you were going to say something, but I'm anxious to add my 2 cents here. We have an addiction to plastics. It works really well. It fits our supply chain really well. It's evolved to become a very effective solution. But what Chris was talking about and others around paper and other materials, I think we need to explore it, because the biggest concern is not just the landfill capacity, and we have maybe 10 years of landfill capacity in Canada, probably similarly in the US. A third of our landfill is packaging, consumer packaging. And at only a 9% recycle rate, there's a real problem. And it's related to how great plastics work for the supply chain and the market that we're fulfilling. And maybe taking a different look at it, and some of the things Ryan talked to about modified atmosphere packaging and barriers, they're all built around an existing system. But that's also because we've evolved to where we're addicted to plastics. But the toxicity is a bigger concern, and that may completely eclipse any other, as you say, George, dogmatic approach that governments take around emissions and sustainability. The toxicity in microplastics are a legitimate evolving concern. And undoing that is not going to be easy. It's going to need to be iterative, many different solutions. So Ryan, things like biodegradable materials, possibly Chris's talk about more use of paper. I think more understanding of the solutions and adaptability, how do we make some of these things work, is really key. I think both retailers, manufacturers, equipment suppliers, and material suppliers need to get together and start to share solutions so that we can learn to adapt before regulators come along and say, look, the toxicity level of microplastics in our bloodstream and in our bodies has exceeded Health Canada or the EPA standards in the US for tolerance, and now we go to zero. We remember the single-use plastics ban that was overturned by the court, but it was still initiated pretty aggressively because there's a reason for it. It's not because of an agenda. There's a reason to address it. And I think a lot of the messaging coming out of the UNINC4 in Ottawa this week will repeat those same messages. So I think I hear a lot of great solutions. I don't know if we can apply them just yet, but I think it's a complex problem that we've evolved, become very addicted to plastics. But I think the conversation like we're having today on a broader scale would be very helpful. I know the government's listening. I know Environment Canada's listening, and the EPA. They're welcoming ideas. I think this dialogue and these conversations like this on a larger scale and more frequently would be very helpful to find a very good solution to a very difficult problem. And that's our addiction to plastics, because it works so well. I'm off my soapbox now. Sorry.
Well said. Excellent point. I'm sorry, Chris. Didn't mean to cut you off early.
No, the only point that I was making was we're seeing a tremendous amount of customers requesting a paper product. And that number I gave you of 95% single substrate is a real number, right? So that means that if I'm running a potato chip factory, I need to get all, if I'm running a gas flush product, I need my saran or whatever coatings are applied to the paper. I need my adhesive coatings in there. I need my printing, and it only leaves 5% for all of that, which is driven manufacturers of material. It's a very challenging solution, and I think it's to our advantage to look and see where Germany is going in that area, and see if we can follow that lead in North America. John, are you seeing that in your sector?
Yeah, we've come up with, like, from our tray sealing line, we've come up with a paper seal tray, a paper tray for our Mondini lines. So we have equipment that can both form the tray automatically and then feed our tray sealing lines. So it started out in Europe, yes, and we're trying to bring it to the US and Canada. It's been a little slower than the progress has been in Europe, but it started really from, Europe gave us kind of the heads up that this is the way it was trending, and now we're seeing it more and more people ask for it here in the U.S. and Canada. I think from my side, from the automation side, what's important for us is to make sure that we have the equipment that can adhere to the new technologies in packaging, in film, and paper. Because, like you said, I think Tom said, being able to retrofit equipment in the field or new automation equipment is going to need to adapt to the new packaging. Automation the packaging is the brain of the system, the packaging machine. So whatever automation you add to it, it's really just working with the brain of the packaging machine. So whatever comes from that is what we have to adapt to. So things like some of our customers moving towards plastic totes instead of RSC cardboard boxes, right? So big in the produce industry, big in bakery, big in case ready meat. What we have had to pivot and do is now we can automate the back end of the depalletizing, destacking, case packing, then restacking, repalletizing. We can even incorporate washing and drying systems so that these customers don't have to stock all of the plastic totes, basically give up a whole warehouse full of footprint to house these things. They can kind of come in dirty. We can wash them in line, pack them, restack them, and send them right back out. So just an example of how we have to adapt to how our customers are becoming more and more aware of sustainable packaging. We've made some strides with biodegradable film for our thermoforming units as well. We had a project that we were working on for California, where that we all know they're going away from the plastics in a couple of years. So some customers coming to us and saying, all right, we need to do something now. So but to answer your original question, Chris, that the paper side was, the idea and the drive came from our European facilities, and we're now trying to institute it here in North America.
And I just wonder, John, are you seeing increased demand in the marketplace for these type of solutions that you described, the ones with significant plastic reduction, where you have, paper tray and just a thin layer of plastic overlap? Is there a growing demand for that?
There's a growing interest, yes, for sure, interest.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I'd have to ask the Mondini product manager here how successful we've been rolling it out, but I know it's been a high interest. Because our trays are something where you can throw the tray is completely biodegradable too. So you just kind of peel the film off, and then you can once it's used, the consumer can peel off the film and throw it into a fully biodegradable tray. So that's more and more I see the conversations, especially at like trade shows, where a lot of it is based around biodegradable film and paper trays instead of the normal plastic trays that we're all so accustomed to.
I'm asking that because it kind of ties into our next question, which would be what role can OEMs and automation suppliers play in driving up demand for more sustainable packaging, machinery, and materials on a scale that justifies, additional capital investment in automation by their CPG customers?
I think what we're doing right now is a great first step. Open dialogue and having the equipment suppliers educate end users like Ryan and myself on what is possible, and bringing in the packaging suppliers and the retailers to really understand how well we can better evolve to more sustainable packaging that meets our existing system. I think we're doing it right now.
As a machine manufacturer, I truly believe that a close alliance with your customer is the most important thing. You really need to understand all their challenges, and also share with the end user where we see the market going for packaging materials, and be responsible enough not to sell them a machine that will only meet their short-term requirements and not their long-term requirements. It's understanding where the industry is going and communicate very clearly. And if people want to make a decision that they say, here's a long-term solution that will give you the ability to run all different materials. Here we could go with another company that would give you a 20% reduction, as long as everybody's communicating and they understand very clearly what they're purchasing. Because from my perspective, it's a 20-year longevity from the time you buy the equipment to the time that you're considering replacing them is 20 years. And we have many examples of that run 24 hours a day, 6 days a week. And it's a 20-year program. So it's our responsibility to try to put as much knowledge as we have today into that, to ensure that our customers 5-10 years down the road aren't disappointed that their equipment won't handle whatever the requirement is then.
The element of the CPG being forward and saying, these are some ideas that we are seeking. So for example, to say that we're going to move from one type of material to another, and then bring in the existing OEMs that are in your facility along with the materials provider to say, we need to take a look at this specific approach, is an opportunity to share really good details, not just, hey, we are able to run a different type of material on our machine. It's, we are able to run the type of material that you, the consumer packaged goods customer, that's producing the product, are looking to move to. How is it that it will be supplied? What are some of the implications for that? Let's run some trials on that. It is that closer working opportunity between with the CPG and the material supplier and the OEM to say, here's an approach that does in fact work. We've trialed it. Now we can move it into a production opportunity.
It's also about, energy efficiency, better use of water and other natural resources, waste minimization, all those other things that tie into the end of life, LC and LCA analysis of the packaging. So like when you design, Chris, when you design new machinery that's going to last 20 years into the future, does the thought of end of life solution for the packaging that machinery is going to run, does that enter your design, your early design process?
The reality is that, we do have partners in our business that are from Germany. So we do get different perspectives as to where Germany is going in that regard. And then by attending Interpack, you're subjecting yourself to some more of the European influences and what their challenges are. because we see a trend that it starts there and migrates into North America. So we have open dialogue with our end users, and the equipment that's being produced needs to meet the industry of today, and then looking into the future. I won't sell a wrapper today that won't run paper, right? It doesn't make sense. It's if you look at the trade show in Germany, every horizontal wrapping company was running paper, and they were all running it at different speeds, but it was very clear as to what the need was, right?
If you're doing a transition to a different type of material and you're trying to maintain the same types of efficiencies, a lot of people are, whether it's a new product launch or like you're doing another commercialization of some new platform that you haven't ever run before, we're seeing people that are trying to get that front and center of their entire production team. They want to make sure that as they make transition to more sustainable packaging materials, that they aren't losing those efficiency gains and that they aren't seeing increased scrap and yield. And so you can't really do that unless it's all real time and in front of everybody when that work's happening. And so we try to take as many data points as we can. Certainly, a lot of those come from OEMs because that data is available. It's just about getting it in the hands of the right people. And we've had a number of people already comment today on making sure that's in. I think it was John earlier who said, partnering with the people that are actually on the floor, the plant team that's the one that are actually doing the work. They're the ones that feel that pain if it doesn't run as well as it used to, or it's a struggle. And so a lot of what we've designed into our solutions are to make them easy and simple for the team on the shop floor to be able to digest and take actionable steps to make sure that when they make one of these transitions, that it's as smooth as possible.
As a manufacturer at Robotique, we do have a responsibility to adapt to all these changes we have talked in the last 30 minutes. And we have seen customer changing from cans to plastic, some, as we mentioned, also to go with cardboard trays. So it's very important to, stay in touch with the customers, making sure that we still offer the flexibility. So on the first day of the equipment being deployed, I think you have to keep that in mind that eventually there's going to have some changes down the road, both on the product life cycle itself, but on the packaging as well. So I think as a manufacturer, there's a high responsibility on providing a highly flexible solution that could adapt to these situation.
Okay. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how much of a role does automation in its current state and in its future state on, our progress towards more sustainable packaging?
It's going to be a massive part today, going forward tomorrow, in the future. There's no question about it. It's going to be sustainable for efficiencies at your factory, reducing your waste, your carbon net footprint, everything. So there's no getting away from it. Everybody needs to look at their own organizations and start to look at where they are today and what they're going to do tomorrow and what they're going to do 5 years from now and how they're going to achieve it.
Yeah, from my perspective, you have no choice but to automate. You're in Canada or you're in North America. Your cost of labor, your challenges associated with getting a consistent labor force. I mean, we believe that ROI is the reason to justify it. When I put multi-million-dollar lines into Mexico, I question as to how they justified it. They said they want the latest technology. So when people come to the plants in Mexico, they don't believe that it's a company that's not utilizing the latest technology. So it is imperative from my perspective as a North American manufacturer that you need to automate, but then keep in mind making sure that there's as much flexibility as possible. And I would use tools like the red zone to ensure that all of your efficiencies are calculated and that you take raw data, and that raw data drives you to a more efficient system.
I think investment attraction is key. It's declining in Canada. It's increasing in the US. I think there's a direct relationship between the long view and the short view. We quite often look for the silver bullet as solutions. Plastics is one of them. We keep looking for single solutions, and there isn't one. I think solution to automation, solution to sustainability is iterative. Many different steps and no single solution. I think collaboration and understanding what solutions fit best in your environment is a good step. And then to think long term, to definitely think, okay, I need to be here now. Here's where I want to be in 20 years. How do I get there? It may not be a single leap. It may be many iterative steps, but the only way to do that is understanding and learning and more dialogue like we're doing today.
To underlining Ryan's opinion of how critical automation can be to sustainability in the future, I think as automation suppliers and packaging suppliers, we have the responsibility to continue to create highly efficient, smaller footprint, faster packaging and automation lines that can adapt to the new technologies coming out in paper and film and biodegradable materials. Because all of that headway that you're making, perhaps on the materials side, is negated if you have lines that are full of defects and just highly inefficient. So they need to work hand in hand. So it's our responsibility as the technology advances in sustainability on the materials side to also be able to collaborate and to handle that in the manufacturing process as well.
So I think Chris and John and others have said it well so far, where I don't think we have a choice with the way the workforce is today in specifically North America, where we just don't have enough people to do the job. But I would also say there's a little bit more of a moral impact to it. Is a lot of the work that we're asking those people to do isn't something that I think has a ton of dignity. It's like, I don't want to, put a piece of something in a box as my 8-hour shift. That is not something that we as humans, I think, find a tremendous amount of joy in. And I think when we do automation, we think about, let's just see how many hours we can save. But those same employees that used to do those trivial tasks, I think a lot of them have a lot of input. They've been in those facilities for years and years, have a lot of experience and knowledge. And if you take them off those jobs, I don't think we automatically should assume that those people are just going to be, out the door. I think then with all that time you get back, you take those best employees and now you can leverage them with better ideas, better input, more continuous improvement initiatives. And then I think in the long run, that's what'll drive some of these projects to get to the efficiency mark they need to hit the right price points and not end up as a, more expensive product for the consumer just because we have new material, new film, other things that cost more. So I think we think about it in terms of labor savings a lot of times, but I think in terms of just dignity on the front line and making manufacturing an attractive job, I think that is a step we can take to make sure that we have an industry where people want to work.
George, I said I share with Doug's piece of the constant incremental improvements that are being made. I also agree that there are more than one solution, just as there are multiple packaging formats, and those packaging formats have a place and continue to be utilized. And there is the collaboration to understand what it is that a company is looking to achieve, and then the effective use of the automation in order to achieve that, to provide the solution that helps the production team achieve what they are seeking to do in terms of producing the particular product for the consumer marketplace, and do so in a manner that will also allow them to adapt as those approaches change moving forward.
Yeah, just a quick note on the labor force. We try sometime to address automation separately from employees. That's where on the sustainability as well, I think it's important to provide great environment to work, and cobalt solutions, including for example, cobalt type of palletizer we manufacture, definitely have great results. One of the main comment we're getting is, why haven't we start working with that yesterday, putting such equipment, as it provides a technology that is work really well with your current employees and would definitely empower also your resources. So not only you limit waste, as we talked earlier, but then it really build the future, having the right equipment on your shop floor. So that's a major impact on the first day you install this. And as Chris said, I mean, it's time to do it for everyone.
So is the glass half full or half empty as far as this whole idea of leveraging automation to achieve better sustainability goes?
Glass is always half full. Gotta look at it the right way.
Well, Ryan, in your case, that's you know, that's a brilliant statement. That gives me hope for humanity at large coming from you. In my mind, this has been a great occasion to interact with some of the brightest minds in the packaging industry, and I'm honored and privileged to have led this discussion. Once again, on behalf of Annex Business Media and the Canadian Packaging Magazine, deep thanks for your contribution and your brilliant insights that I'm sure our audience will enjoy. Thank you all and Godspeed.
Thank you.
George.
You.
Thanks, George. Appreciate it.